I'm going to present to you mainly from the perspective of how this budget can potentially make India more self-reliant and how we would be able to do a lot of things which we always wanted to do, but were hesitant to do for reasons financial. How is this budget different from past budgets? The government has constantly grappled with uh, resource inadequacy, the inability to spend as much as we needed, and a constant concern about meeting fiscal targets. So that would reflect on our ratings and various other macroeconomic factors. So generally, this fiscal fear has always kept us away from bigger investments and doing things faster than we usually do. So while the investment needs of the country were far higher and what we needed to do was of a higher magnitude, what we actually did was generally lower. So in that sense, this budget has given the government an opportunity to invest its way out of the COVID recession. So when faced with the crisis of COVID, the immediate expectation in our country amongst the polity was that the government should pay money to citizens directly, and that should be the primary driver of how we are going to bring ourselves out of the recession. This was born out of how the developed countries like the US were fashioning their response to COVID. But India, on the other hand, chose to depart from that path and has chosen to invest its way out of the COVID recession. Then that is broadly reflected in this budget in many parts, and it is also reflected in what the government did as part of the Atmanirbhar Bharat mission during the COVID. So these two are essentially a continuum, one taking over from the other. The government plans to raise a lot of resources by selling assets. I know there are skeptics, but in 2002-03, there were as many skeptics about the ability of the government to sell companies. The government did manage to sell a few companies, and unfortunately, post 2004, because of the presence of the left in the government, we did not choose to extend that success forward. So, but now we don't have any of those compulsions. This government is just 2 years into a new term. It has got 3 full years. So if they are able to convince the world about their sincerity of intent in privatization and in disinvestment, the government will be able to raise resources by selling assets. At the level at which the stock market is, there is ample investment appetite to do disinvestment. The question is whether we will do privatization. That is the issue that we are yet to, get confirmatory signals. We will know in course of this year, because the government has at least 3 big ticket sales waiting to happen. One is, of course, Air India. The other 2 are BPCL and Concord. My sense is that the government will be able to sell these 3. It will also be able to do an LIC IPO. So this year and the next year, the government should be able to raise resources by selling assets in the form of privatization and disinvestment. The reinvestment sale proceeds will go towards the national infrastructure plans. You all know about the national infrastructure pipeline. That is going to be one of the important investment moves of the government, which will hopefully revive the economy, because unless the government is going to invest, private sector is not going to get the confidence. So when the government invests aggressively, it is likely that we will find matching investments from the private sector. This sounds like a very paradoxical thing, because the popular perception in our country is that the private sector is the only one that is driving investment. That is not true. If you look at the last 3 or 4 years, the private sector has not been able to invest aggressively. In fact, as COVID, at the onset of COVID, the private sector was fully stretched, and you will all remember that Reliance Industries has raised huge sums of money by monetizing its ownership in businesses, and it has chosen not to invest in businesses. So private sector is in a place where they want to raise resources and not invest, whereas the government has been consistently investing over the last 4 or 5 years, and the government has been a far more regular and committed investor in the country. So that is the reality, and I think that the reinvestment proceeds will go towards the national infrastructure pipeline, and we should see many of these projects moving the economy forward. Then the government has come clean with its finances. This is one thing which has been a criticism of not just this government, but successive governments. The criticism was basically that governments are not presenting their finances in a transparent manner. What I mean by this is you always have off balance sheet items. You have expenses of 1 year being pushed to the next year. Such things have been avoided in this budget. They have come clean and used this crisis to clean up their books and to bring all the items into the budget. So which means that this deficit which has been presented is much closer to the real, true and fair picture than it ever was. So that is one thing that has happened, and this budget is different in that sense. And this is another point which Mr. Santhanam touched upon, that about the government's estimates of revenue and recognition of expenses. I would think that the government will be able to do much better on revenues. There are some reasons. See, if you look at the corporate tax rates which were brought down in 2019, we should look at it in conjunction with what happened in the personal tax changes in 2020. What the government has done is very simple. They have reduced corporate taxation to 25%, but they have increased the peak rate for personal income taxes to 42%. What this means is, if a company makes a profit of 100 rupees, if it pays tax of 25 rupees, it is free to retain the 75 rupees and invest it in whatever way it wants. However, if the company chooses to pay out the entire 75 rupees which is remaining after payment of taxes, those will be taxed in the hands of the owners or the shareholders at a higher rate, because the peak tax rate with all the additional taxes and the slabs works out to 42%. So if India's big businessmen choose to invest all their profits back in new projects, into expansion, into creation of capacity, infrastructure and business, they will not be taxed very highly on their personal books. On the contrary, if they want to take the money out of their company and onto their personal books, they will have to pay a much higher tax rate. So if dividends are going to be paid at a very high rate, as it seems to be the case, the taxation from the rich is likely to be significant. It is not going to come down. It is going to keep going up. However, corporate taxation will be lower. But this again is not too bad, because this is being done with the clear intent of attracting global investors to come to India. That is the basic thing, because there is a lot of manufacturing shifting away from China. Our intention is to catch some part of it into our country, and this is also happening. Then with respect to recognition of GST income, the government has handled GST with a soft handle right through this 4-year period. It has not aggressively gone after evaders. It has not even used its own levers in the GST system to track, to trace, and to capture cases of evasion. It is still going slow. Only now all the aspects of the GST mechanism or the infrastructure which will help the government trace, track and ensure revenue compliance are all coming into full play. So this should see a significant traction in GST. We are seeing in the last few months. I think that over the next 1 year, this traction should at least sustain, if not improve. So looking at all these points, the revenues may actually have been conservatively estimated, keeping the last year in mind, because last year's revenues may not be reflective of next year's revenues. So making an estimate based on last year's numbers may not be a good way of doing it. But the government has chosen to use the last year's slackness and use that as the guiding thing for revenues. On expense side, as I mentioned, they have brought all the expenses onto the books, so it has recognized the expenses fully, which is why you have these high fiscal deficits for these 2 years. So the government has clearly chosen to bite that bullet and not continue with its general habit of keeping things off book. So there is some scope for actuals to beat estimates, but we'll have to see that the economic momentum of the present has to sustain. Like Mr. Santhanam mentioned, if there is a V-shaped recovery, there is a marginal scope for the actuals to beat estimates. So that is how this budget is different from the past budgets. In the past budgets, when the government made the estimates itself, you would know that the actuals would lag by a small sum. It was known, though everybody will be optimistic and praising the budget, we would know that the actuals will, there would be some gap between what was estimated and what will actually materialize. And this has been the case for several years put together. So in that sense, this budget is different from past budgets in the way they have estimated revenue, expense, and in the way they have brought everything onto the books. The 6 pillars of this budget, I will not waste too much time, but I will touch upon them briefly. Health and well-being, physical and financial capital infrastructure, inclusive development for aspirational India, reinvigorating human capital, innovation and R&D, and minimum government and maximum governance. Now, generally, these are things which are a continuum. It is merely a continuation of what is done in one budget after the other. What we find in budget speeches is that you are using the budget speech to present, to repackage what you are doing and present it in a more interesting way to the citizens. So in that sense, this 6 pillars of the budget is a continuum. They have added a few layers wherever necessary, but they're packaged and present in a way in which the people are able to clearly see what the government is doing for them. That is what one should be clear about. So every budget cannot present something new because government have running schemes. If you notice, even in this budget, a lot of budgetary estimates are given as 5-year allotments, which means that it's going to be spent over a period of 5 years. When you are doing that, you cannot present anything new for that period under that head unless you're going to stop doing it, which is unlikely. So that essentially is how these 6 pillars are fashioned. Quickly to health and well-being. The outlay for this year is a record outlay, and the government has added a new scheme for this, and it has also repackaged existing schemes under this head to present how much it is going to do. We have the Jal Jeevan Mission, which was announced earlier, which is one of the flagship programs of the government. See, if you look at the Modi government, some of the important programs like the PMAY and the Jal Jeevan are intending to give people housing and water supply, domestic water supply. And this program is a very, very big program. It is going to run for years together. And they have made a plan to ensure that all houses in urban local bodies will have tap connections. So in the sense, it's a very, very large program with a multi-year dimension. Then you have the Urban Swachh Bharat program, which is again an extension of the Swachh Bharat scheme that has been running. You will see that they're given a 5-year outlay, which means that this will be continually pursued. The third one is again something which has been running under the National Urban Renewal Mission, under various national missions. This wastewater treatment has been going on, but again they have presented under health and well-being with a 5-year outlay. Again and again you will see this 5-year outlay coming in several areas of the budget, which means that the government is giving visibility of how much investments it will make over an extended period of time. Yes, it is entirely optics, but that's what it is. Then the last one is a very important and tangible thing which has to happen this year, which is the COVID vaccine and an allocation for that. India, as you all know, is turning out to be the vaccine capital of the world. Luckily, capacity creation during a phase when the vaccine market globally was not doing so great, and there wasn't a great advantage in producing vaccines. The cost of production had to be the lowest in the world. Indian companies chose to achieve that economies of scale, and therefore they were well positioned to capture this crisis as an opportunity. And we are going to see vaccine production being driven out of India for the rest of the world. So essentially, India would be able to meet her vaccine needs quite comfortably, and the government had to only allocate money. So this essentially is what health and well-being is about. They have repackaged what they have been doing all along, and they've added the vaccine as a dimension. Then the physical and financial capital and infrastructure. Here again, if you see, the government wants to encourage global manufacturing in India. You have the PLI scheme, for which they have allocated a lot of money, 1.97 lakh crores over a period of 5 years. So if people produce, the government has to incentivize. So it's not like they're going to give incentives on the day one. Incentives will be given every year on the basis of production and how much of manufacturing happens in our country. The capex for the year is increased by 34.5% to 5.54 lakh crores, which is a very welcome thing. The government continues to be committed to spending. The Insurance Act was amended to increase the maximum FDI to 75 24%, which again is going to open up for a lot of global participation in Indian insurance. Then you had the Solar Energy Corporation of India. Mr. Satyan already mentioned that a lot of projects were announced in pole-bound states, and so that is the highlight of the national highway budget. Then the textile parks are another very, very important idea for the simple reason that one industry in which India can get a better global presence and a closer leadership position in value-added products is the textile business, for reasons which we don't have excuses for. We have failed to do this in the last couple of decades. A lot of policy continuity has been lacking, but I think that now we are again trying to create parks where exclusive focus will be there, and we would be able to create a lot of centers of manufacturing excellence. So broadly, this is on the physical and financial capital and infrastructure part. The third part is inclusive development for aspirational India. So here you have the one nation, one ration card, which is already implemented in 32 states. And you are also having the commitment of MSP becoming 1.5 times the production cost across all commodities. In this, I must note that the government has done something quite ingenious. What they have done is that they brought this agri-infrastructure cess, which you will see in petrol and diesel, but you also have it across a number of commodities which are being imported. Effectively, if you look at the gap between the MSP and the mandi prices, and you add the agri cess to some of these commodities in which it has been brought, you will find that the mandi price plus the agri cess will be equal to the MSP. So government wants the mandi price to move to the MSP so that it does not have to support MSP to the extent it is doing currently in other crops which it has brought under MSP. So if you look at cotton, while they have given an outlay of MSP support of 25,974 crores, if cotton prices in the mandi go up, then the government would not need to spend this money. Similarly, in pulses, it's the same story. But in paddy and wheat, we don't have that luxury. So you need to still spend that money towards MSP procurement. They have also increased the agricultural credit. We can debate whether agricultural credit is required to that extent, but without credit, this industry will, this sector will not become more organized, and it needs formal credit to make people scale up, to aspire, and to become more mechanized and forward process oriented. So that is something that we need to do, and this has been happening. We also have the other things which, like the social security for gig. Education has been a very, very important skill development education. All these have been a continuum of activity. So they've made a lot of announcements, like they're going to bring Sainik schools. They're going to have a central university. They're going to have model residential school in tribal and hilly areas. You're going to have an umbrella body for higher education. And then you're going to have 35,000 crores to welfare of scheduled caste students for 6 years to benefit 4 crore scheduled caste students. So which is basically a post-matric school program. So all these again are mainly packaging of existing ideas with a little bit more of outlay, giving visibility for 5 years. That's essentially what they've done under this idea. Then you have the innovation R&D. Here again, we have the National Research Foundation with an outlay of 50,000 crore over 5 years. And India wants to do more. They want to have a deep ocean mission for survey exploration. They want national language translation mission. This is a very interesting idea because it will bridge the rural-urban gap, and also the lack of uniformity in development across regions because of language barriers will be broken, and we will see a lot of states which are lagging because of language able to meet that gap and bridge it, and they will be able to develop faster. That's another important aspect. And then you have a new Space India Limited, an idea which is going to take space technology to the next level. Then you have the Gaganyaan mission. So all these are ideas where the government wants to present itself as a scientifically supportive entity and try to tell that we will do a lot of things, and we want private sector also to do a lot of things. There was a mention of the R&D budgets of corporations being increased significantly to global standards. So a lot of messaging, but essentially this is again a case of packaging what was already being done with a little bit of new ideas thrown in. Then to the minimum government and maximum governance. Here again, we are going to have our first digital census. We have assumed that the fiscal deficit is going to be very high at 9.5%. Hopefully, it's lower than what we have estimated. And then we have talked about market borrowings of 12 lakh crores, and the government is also going to ensure that there is going to be regulation of healthcare as an industry, which is long due, because once you regulate, you will be able to set standards and ensure that the healthcare professionals across the value chain maintain those standards. We are not seeing that happening yet in India, and so we need to provide a national healthcare system and have a regulator for that. That is something that is the highlight of under this idea. You also have a lot of tax proposals. I don't want to repeat them, but broadly, to make life simpler for NRIs, for senior citizens, for startups, to give them more time with a tax holiday, to make it simpler for companies to pay dividends, because the person receiving the dividend can pay his advance tax as soon as he receives the dividend and not before. Because if the advance tax date is earlier, how would you know that the company is going to pay you the dividend? So it's not possible to pay enough advance tax in June for dividend paid in March. So this is a very positive development, and that's something which is investor friendly. Then you also have extended this faceless dispute mechanism for taxation up to 50 lakhs and disputed income up to 10 lakhs. You can use this committee and you can always get your grievance redressed. And increasing tax audit from 5 crore to 10 crore is again a very, very big move. MSMEs need not go in for tax audits. Almost most of the MSMEs will be out of tax audit. So they will invest less time in this audit procedure. As long as they run themselves, their organizations in a transparent and a very clean way, there would be no problem, and they could finish their audit much faster, and they can focus on business. This is again a very, very welcome move. Lastly is the pre-filled capital gains forms. It means that the government is now going to estimate how much tax you need to pay. Earlier, the rich were doing it themselves. So the scope for tax evasion under this pre-filled is going to keep reducing. So again, the government is simplifying things but making it difficult to evade. So that is what the minimum government, maximum governance proposals convey. Then you have some changes in customs duty. Then you had GST relief wherever there were inverted structures. You had some exemptions for some 400 items in indirect tax. Broadly, under taxation, there's not much that government can do. Mostly cosmetic things, tinkering with few things here and there based on what the industry wants. So most of these structures are well set, and the government cannot do much in the budget. The only thing that they can do is through the GST Council, and we will hear from them shortly whether they're going to merge the two slabs of 12 and 18%. We are hearing some such messaging from the minister. We'll have to wait and see, because that can be a really big thing in terms of minimum government and maximum governance, but that's under the purview of the GST Council. So that's something that we need to wait for. Now, this is something which we have not understood well enough. The Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan, which was a 20 lakh package, was mocked by a lot of people, but my assessment, it's a very, very interesting way of pulling India out of the problem. What did they do? They gave more credit to people who are under stress. They gave money to organizations. So they gave loans, they increased the capitalization of companies, because in such a crisis, the promoter will not be able to bring money quickly. The banks were asked to lend. This definitely is going to help a lot of people who got that money to come back quickly and to bring themselves out of COVID very quickly. There was also a clear thing that money will be given under Atmanirbhar Bharat to every entity who needs capital to survive this crisis. So the beneficiaries were across the spectrum. I mentioned companies. It's not just companies. It was the poor, it was laborers, it was migrants, it was farmers. Many people are given money under this. And again, this was again structured under 5 pillars, which is economy, infrastructure, system, demography, and demand. So the government is choosing to package its work under a framework so that it's able to present its work better. That is why you have these pillars and you have the tranches. We did it under 5 tranches. The first one was for businesses, then it was the poor, including farmers, then agriculture, then new horizons of growth, and the 5th tranche was government reforms and enabling activities.